Hey, what's up, everybody? Greg J here. Coffee Conversations with Greg J is on. Today, I've been just contemplating on cultural celebrations in urban communities. I'm kind of familiar with the subject, and what's brought me to this space of Coffee Conversations with Greg J, where we have culturally relevant conversations about a variety of topics from a decidedly global perspective, is the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It would appear that the celebration in these days and time, this current generation, has kind of lost its luster, kind of been kicked to the curb in some spaces, kind of blase, complacent is the word that I want to say when it comes down to the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. At the same time, we see community groups raising their voice against civic entities because they feel that these civic entities have erased Black representation from its presentation of Dr. Martin Luther King celebrations. Very interesting. And as one who has produced and been at the center of community celebrations, cultural celebrations for generations, I have an intimate and upfront, close and personal perspective of how these events are organized, how community partnerships and civic engagement sync up in present the presentations. I very much know exactly what happens in this space of cultural celebrations. And I'm a little concerned. Let me just kind of get my notes here. Bear with me while I can kind of share some thoughts with you, just thinking out loud, if you will, about the Martin Luther King celebration in Long Beach. Like I said, activists raised their voice in protest, saying that the political entities have kind of co-opted and even erased Black representation from the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. No, for more than 30 years, I have worked as an executive at the most vibrant Black-owned, vibrant broadcast companies in the country. National radio networks to local radio stations. I have served in management level marketing positions. My mass communications career has always been centered on the Black experience. In these roles, I was privileged to be a central participant in teams that produced and distributed award-winning programming, deeply substantive content that was heard on hundreds of radio stations nationwide. Shows like King from Atlanta to the Mountaintop, heard locally here on KJLH-FM Los Angeles and across Black America on radio stations coast to coast. I have created and produced major community festivals and been an integral participant in the planning of parades in cities like Los Angeles and Inglewood. A little more than 20 years of my career was spent at the legendary radio station KJLH 102.3. It's owned by music and cultural icon Stevie Wonder. Now, Stevie was the catalyst for the establishment of the Martin Luther King holiday in America. Congressmember John Conyers of Michigan and Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. King, rallied the necessary political avenues, the hallways of government to get support for a holiday. And Stevie rallied the community and completely funded the campaign. He took 3 years off of his career to establish offices in Washington, D.C. He provided staff and community outreach. He even held a march on the steps of the Capitol in Washington. They rallied and advocated the government to observe the greatness of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And in 1983, the third Monday of January was proclaimed a federal holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King's birthday is January 15th. Now, this celebration started in 1986. That's when the first celebration occurred. It's with this campaign that spawned the culturally essential Happy Birthday, written by Stevie Wonder, and came out in 1981. Consequently, in my role in Stevie's organization, I was directly responsible for the planning, coordination, execution, and production of all activities of the radio station in commemoration of Dr. King. I'm the point person. This means I'm working with programming to ensure that content is informing and inspiring our audiences. I'm writing relevant and accurate scripts uh, for our air personalities, full of facts and historical notes for them. I'm creating content for the station's voice online. I'm involved in research, interacting with organizations like the King Center in Atlanta or the Stanford University King Papers Project. I'm working directly with city representatives, both elected and departmental, to pull permits, liaison with police, fire, and other public safety entities to make sure that public assemblage is within regulatory standards. I worked with nonprofit groups, community-based organizations, shouldering the responsibility for production logistics, booking, transportation, civic engagement. I led efforts to plan and produce large-scale festivals across the region in celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King, Leimert Park, City of Inglewood's King Fest, faith-based events, you name it, I was in the mix doing it. In fact, I created the first MLK celebration in Leimert Park alongside then council member Bernard Parks of the 8th District and the former LAPD chief. It is now an essential element of LA's commemoration. The point here is that the commemoration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is in my DNA. And it's from this intimate and experienced perspective that I offer these observations today. Let's start by examining civic nuances in cultural celebrations. The city government has always been an active participant in celebrations for Dr. King. Clearly, government is checking a box. Plus, they see value in promoting community goodwill, so they provide resources that help navigate through city systems, police, traffic management, fire, EMT, code enforcement, thus and so. All across the region, MLK celebrations have become hallmarks of how government and community can work together to generate positivity and pride. Over the course of the last 4 decades, these essential partnerships have amplified the vibrancy of arts and cultural relevance in urban communities. Yet recent years have spurred changes in the nuance and energy given to these celebrations. It would appear that MLK celebrations have become out of style. Seemingly, interest from the community has waned. Interest in city government has shifted. It would appear that after the government gave us Juneteenth as a pacifier, no doubt, it would seem that the energy of celebrating Blackness has become mundane. Over time, in many communities, things have changed. We see many personnel change inside of City Hall, those personnel who would advocate and push and make sure that city pays attention to our cultural celebrations, MLK being one of them. The various departments, champions for the cause. They're leaving, they're retiring. Generations are changing. These generational changes profoundly reflect the evolving demographics of entire historic neighborhoods. These cultural changes demand learning and listening so that we can adapt and overcome. We can't assume civic administrators will embrace or even value the legacy of Dr. King in the same enthusiastic manner as previous generations. Fiscal challenges also have caused municipalities to adjust budgets to integrate Dr. King with Black History Month, thereby hitting the proverbial 2 birds with 1 stone. In other cases, cultural shifts in demographics have deeply affected the excitement and even lost focus of the spirit of Dr. King and the importance of cultural relevance in its celebration. It's like the exuberance of celebrating Black culture is being muted. In Long Beach, the parade and festival is highly anticipated. Over the years, it absolutely captured the spirit of celebrating the legacy of Dr. King through its emphasis of Black community pride and excellence. It's an opportunity to celebrate history, progress, inclusion, equality, achievement. Yet, in recent generations, the celebration has lost its luster, and in 2025, some will say its direction. Activists have raised their voice to point out the near erasure of Black representation in the parade. I kind of agree with this summation. The Long Beach MLK Parade and Festival is an essentially important acknowledgement of Black excellence and community pride. Now, as political power evolves, cultural perspectives collide. We know that the first Cambodian American to serve in the city council, great achievement, taking over a district that is historically heretofore was represented by African Americans, long and deep Black historical positioning. And with this political shift comes cultural division. People are feeling that the voice, the jubilee, the exuberance of the Black experience is being extinguished right before our very eyes. Now, while I do not have a recording or documented proof of this, I will share that I was at a meeting, a public meeting at the Mark Twain Library, in where the council member did say that she was going to change the way Dr. King was celebrated in Long Beach. And I have long wondered, always, what exactly does that mean? Like, what do you mean? What are you saying? It amplified for me the necessity to tell our own story. Now, keeping this realization in mind, I have always intimated to key influencers in the Long Beach Black community that we need to be about telling our own story. Long Beach needs to be about the business of telling its own story. Black community must take control of the narrative. It's essential where it comes down to the commemoration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I've always felt that the community depended too much on city officials to have culture at heart. Black folk have exposed their flank. Powers that be could minimize and even erase and silence the celebration of Blackness in this city. What are we so confident that those in political power will have the same reverence for the legacy of our struggle? In this city, there's groups who surely use the example of our struggle to articulate its model towards social justice, equality, and freedom for all. There's groups who profess diversity and inclusion, but yet do not honor the legacy. In fact, they just kind of go through the motions, if you will, when it comes down to tasks necessary to commit to honoring a Black person or holiday. Folk are hesitant to celebrate our Blackness. I mean, let's face it, they want our rhythm, but they don't want our blues. I believe the Black community should take lead in planning and producing the Martin Luther King Parade and celebration. I believe an organization could be formed to accomplish this task. If we look at models across the region, we can glean strong case studies as to what this looks like. In Inglewood, the celebration is governed by a commission-like committee that's full of stakeholders, of course, city employees, leaders of nonprofit organizations, community groups, the educational system, the faith community, thus and so. They provide policy and direction for the celebration. The funding, logistics, and execution of the parade and festival. And it's not really a parade, it's more of emulating a civil rights march is what they've chosen to do. But the festivities in the city of Inglewood are brought to bear through resources given by the Department of Parks and Recreation. But the committee is in charge of fundraising, grand marshal selection, honorees, the essence, the preservation of cultural relevance, a robust essay contest within the schools that engages the students. The Martin Luther King celebration in Inglewood is governed by the committee and executed by the City Department of Parks and Recreation. The Kingdom Day Parade in Los Angeles was founded by CORE California, Congress of Racial Equality California. That is a legendary and storied civil rights organization founded in the 60s by James Farmer, and names like Roy Ennis are coming from that organization. The branch that is based in California was led by General Celis King III and Larry Grant and Adrian Dove. And Mr. Dove and CORE still produce and coordinate the parade in Los Angeles. Yes, support from the electeds, but cultural relevancy is maintained by the committee, the organization, the nonprofit. They call on the electeds to make sure things like street closures and public safety, the necessary permits. They, work with the organization to make sure all of those fiduciary requirements are taken care of and the parade can progress in the manner that it was intended. Now, the festival in the Leimert Park is a completely different story. This is where it is a function of the councilmatic districts. It should be noted here that also in the 90s, what do I mean by that? The city council members of District 8 and 10, where basically those borderlines kind of abut right in that general area. But they put together the festival in Leimert Park, working with the merchants of Leimert Park, working with organizations that have information and services to offer the public. They're serving the public by sharing resources and information with the community at the end point of the Kingdom Day Parade, which is Leimert Park. It should be noted with the parade that in the 90s, there was extreme friction between the Korean American community and the Black community. And in order to build bridges and heal harms between Blacks and Koreans, Grandmaster Tong Suk Chun was invited by General King and Mr. Grant to join the inner circle to participate and plan and organize the parade. Grandmaster Tong Suk Chun is an influential leader within the Korean community. These are stellar examples of civic and community partnerships. Yes, municipal support, but guided by the internal experience of a culturally relevant committee committed to truth, faith in action. In closing, here's some of the critical thought analysis that I've applied while watching the celebrations of 2025 unfold. As a culture keeper, I believe that we are in need of a cultural revolution in the Black community. What does this mean? This means being committed to telling our own stories, being insistent when we feel that the narrative is being led astray or skewed or adjusted by the sensitivities of people. Tell the truth. Tell our story. When we leave our story to others, it almost always gets damaged or mistold. In the main, it just does, right? This also means that we have to guide to preserve cultural relevance when engaged with institutions of politics. This means that we have to reassess our content, our music, our current day presentations, so prevalent across media platforms in this day and time. It means embracing our central communities and the history therein, protecting the image, the presentation, the life, the vibrancy of our communities. It means committing to preserve our cultural traditions and keep them from being absorbed into general society and ultimately erased from consciousness. We now live in a world where these political entities will no longer be compelled to check the box. A world that is evolving demographically so that where we once were, we are not any longer. We, our voice, our essence, our arts, our culture is susceptible to minimization and, in the worst case, complete erasure in these urban communities. So therefore, we have to stand on culture, stand on art, stand on history, be proud of who we are, guide the powers that be. It's nation time, y'all. Promote arts and culture, celebrate our culture, work with civic entities, but preserve our history, truth telling. It's nation time, y'all. Peace and blessings.